All right, I think I can start. We have quite a few folks joining in today. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to the virtual meetup for Apache Pinot at LinkedIn. My name is Mayank Srivastav, and I will be your host for the evening. Quick background about myself. I am a software lead in the big data analytics platform team at LinkedIn. Have been primarily focusing on Apache Pinot, and I've been involved in Pinot since the early days. Quick rundown of the agenda for tonight. We will first spend a few minutes just catching up on what we have been up to since the last meetup, which happened about 3 months ago. And then we will also discuss what's coming up next in terms of the future roadmap, as well as any immediate milestones. Then we have the 3 very interesting talks. I'm really excited about them. I'm really hopeful you guys will like it, on how Pinot is powering analytics, different use cases of analytics. We will hold off the Q&A until after the talks. We will have a Q&A session using Slido. So feel free to go ahead and ask your questions on Slido as you can think of it, and you definitely upvote any questions you might want to answer, have us answered. Yeah. The link for the Slido, we will drop it on the chat itself shortly. So you should have that handy as well. So a quick recap of what we have been up to since the last meetup. We actually released the 0.4.0, which had a lot of good features. Some of the key callouts there are, we added support for S3 as a deep store. We already had support for HDFS, ADLS on Azure, and GCP. We enhanced our text indexing and also added support for range indexes. Added support for theta sketches, as well as complex segregation functions, which can take multiple arguments now. One of the interesting callouts is the addition of transformations at ingestion time. So in the absence of this feature, let's say you have events that you want to consume in Pinot, but they are not really in the form that you want them to be. There are some minor transformations need to be done at row level, right? In the absence of this feature, you would have to essentially have a upstream job that would take care of that before the events come to Pinot. What this feature allows you is get rid of that upstream job, and push down the transformations into Pinot. This is actually a huge productivity gain or win for our customers, because not only they don't have to write write these jobs, but also they don't have to maintain and the operations around it. We also released a couple of very informative tutorials on, for the first one, on how to use Pinot, how to set it up on your local node, and just familiarizing yourself with the various components. And a slightly more advanced one, which is on how to use or run Pinot on Kubernetes. And last but not the least, we had a tech talk on Pinot in the Kafka Summit very recently. We've seen tremendous growth in our community in the last 3 months alone. We have member growth of 2x, so we are at 500 members now, yay. We are primarily active in the Apache Pinot Slack channel, so definitely come join us if you're not already a member. If you're just curious about Pinot, or just want to learn something, or you have a very advanced troubleshooting question, we have channels for those, and we definitely monitor them and try to help out the community as much as possible. Another thing that we noticed is our Docker pulls have gone up to 100K just in the last 3 months, which is very commendable. There is about 20 plus companies that are trying out Pinot in production today. We have more than 120 contributors who are actively working on the code base. We have more than 7,200 commits so far. In terms of the deployment, LinkedIn, of course, is the largest deployment of Pinot today in production. Uber is the second one, which is using Pinot for business critical things right now. And we have a lot of other companies that are trying out. So this is what we have been up to so far. What's coming up? The next immediate thing that we're working on is the 050 release that's being cut as we speak. Again, a lot of good things going into this release. In the query execution domain, we are adding the support for geospatial indexing, adding support for post-aggregation function evaluation. An example there would be that, let's say you wanted to perform a ratio of sum of metric 1 by sum of metric 2. This would be the vehicle that will let you do that. Adding support for the having clause as part of the standard SQL effort. And last but not the least, in the query side, we also are adding or have added the JDBC client for Pinot. On the ingestion front, we are extending the transformation during ingestion to also support filtering. And we're also adding support for protobuf for during ingestion, which was missing. So earlier on, we had support for other things like Avro, JSON, etc. On the operational front, we have completely revamped our cluster manager UI, which looks like this now. So before this, if you wanted to query Pinot, you would actually go to the query console. If you wanted to, let's say, do some admin tasks, you would either do it via CLI or actually go to the Swagger UI. And if you wanted to debug the cluster state, you would do that by connecting to the inspector. With this cluster manager UI, you get a one-stop shop for everything, and it just makes gives a huge productivity gain to the customers and the users. For the slightly longer-term plan, what's happening next? We're working on Spark Pinot connector. We're also trying to add support for DDLs on PrestaSQL. Tiered storage is a very interesting one. We are seeing a lot of use cases wherein the most recent data is being queried most frequently versus the historic data not so frequently. So it does not make a lot of sense to have all your data stored in a single tier of expensive storage. So with this, you would be able to have your recent data that is being queried more frequently on expensive SSDs versus offload the historic data to some cheaper cold storage. On the real-time ingestion front, we are also going to support real-time only ingestion. What that means is today you need to support or Pinot requires you to have, does not require, but it does support having a real-time as well as an offline ingestion pipeline, which is kind of like a duplicate effort. But if you think about it, whatever Pinot has ingested can actually, it can do all the optimizations it needs to do, like auto rollups, compactions, and then perhaps relocate the offline data onto the offline subcluster without the users having to do anything about it. This again is a huge productivity gain. You're getting rid of your offline or batch pipelines, not just coding them, but also getting rid of the operations and maintenance. On the mutability front, the absurd work continues. And last but not the least, we are also going to add support for complex data structures like lists, maps, structs, JSON, etc. So, all right, that's pretty much on catching up and what's next. For the main event, we have three very interesting talks. The first one is from Bill Kwong, who is a staff software engineer in the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions department. He was recently involved in solving complex problems in the audience matching domain, where he ended up using Pinot data sketches. So his talk will share his experience on that. We have Sigyan Lee, who's a senior software engineer in the Pinot team at LinkedIn. He is going to talk about all the optimizations that we did in Pinot to scale it up from a service that runs or was running or powering just dashboards to powering analytics at LinkedIn member scale. And last but not the least, we have Sudha, who is going to talk about how they were able to use Pinot or actually tune Pinot to get a ridiculous amount of performance out of a very tiny Pinot footprint.